If you're fearing money, if you have a fearful sort of narrative that you have about money, I want you to question the narrative. Specifically, I
Mm.
want you to understand, where did this fear come from? Because money, unlike a lot of the other fears that I tackle in the book, it's not a state of mind. It is a thing, it is a tool. Often I say when we fear money, what we're really fearing is our relationship with money, our understanding of money, our interpretations of money.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terry Cole Show. So let's talk about money, shall we? Because that is what I'm talking about in this episode with my guest, Farnoosh Torabi. She is one of America's leading personal finance experts. She's the host of the award-winning podcast, So Money, which has earned over 30 million downloads. It is a very popular podcast. She is a sought-after speaker, and she's written a bunch of books. And actually, we're talking about her newest book, which is called A Healthy State of Panic. And it's part memoir, part guidebook on how fear can be a superpower to achieve true wealth and career success. Along with being featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Farnoosh has appeared frequently on the Today Show, Good Morning America, and so much more. I actually met Farnoosh, I gotta say, I swear it has to be 15 years ago. And I first met her through a mutual friend, Selena Sue. We had like a business breakfast together, and we've just sort of stayed in each other's sphere since then. And whenever I have money questions, I always see what would she say about it. So the book is The Healthy State of Panic: Follow Your Fears to Build Wealth, Crush Your Career, and Win at Life. I hope that you enjoy my interview with Farnoosh as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I am so happy to welcome Farnoosh Torabi to the Terry Cole Show. Farnoosh, welcome.
Thank you, Terry. I'm just so happy to be here.
So you have very exciting news. I'm dying to talk. Like one of my pain points in life has been my relationship to money.
Oh,
So I always love your books. You have a million books on this, but your newest book, A Healthy State of Panic, which I was like, oh my God, I resonate with that. Follow your fears to build wealth, crush your career, and win at life. Came out recently and is doing incredibly well, and was just chosen by Newsweek to be one of the best books of 2023. So congratulations.
thank you.
It's pretty exciting.
Feels
So
good.
can we start with how, like, your journey to becoming this financial expert that you are? Can we just start with that? Like, it's kind of like a Marvel movie. I want a little bit of your origin story.
Yeah, it starts with, a young girl dreaming one day of her life, sharing 401k transfer advice to an audience of millions. No, it started really as a little girl, as the daughter of immigrants from Iran.
Mm,
Really, that's where it all began. As most origin stories go back as far as our childhoods, because this is when we get first impressions to so many things. And for me, as the daughter of Iranian immigrants who moved to the United States with the backdrop of a revolution happening in Iran, coming here to quote unquote, build a better life, American dream, the whole shebang. They, like a lot of, I think, Middle Easterners, particularly Iranians, and maybe it's just like an immigrant community thing, I don't
mhm,
know, but we talked about money a lot. And it wasn't because we had all of it or even enough of it. We had
mhm,
struggles like a lot of households, but we didn't see money as this off the table topic. It wasn't taboo. And, honestly, as a kid, I didn't think that it was weird to know to want to know at least, or to be curious, like how much do people make and how did that person
mhm,
afford that house? And my father would come home, and he was the single breadwinner for a while, and he would talk about the stresses at work and how there were layoffs and da da da.
mhm,
And I think for me, again, it wasn't because I was understanding it all necessarily or even invited into the conversations, but I was around it. And so as I grew up, I had this fluency and this comfort level around financial topics that I think was unusual and
mhm,
was ultimately a strength for me as I'm navigating now my career and what I want to do. And at the root of it all, I think, Terry, I always wanted to be somebody who was a storyteller, was in
mhm.
service, helpful. If you asked me when I was 6 or 7 years old, what do you want to be? I'd say, like, I want to be I want to work in a restaurant. I want to take people's orders. I want to bring people food. And I kind of still do that. Like I don't work in a restaurant, but I love hosting and I
Yeah.
love, feeding people. And so like who we are
Yeah.
as little people is not inconsequential to who we become. And layered onto that, of course, is the education that I then had around getting a finance degree and then my master's in journalism. And for me, journalism seemed to be the all encompassing field where I could tell
Mm,
stories, I could be in service, I could practice my curiosity. And when you go to
right.
journalism school or you decide to become a journalist, it's really important to figure out what's your lane, at least in the beginning. Like, what am
Hmm.
I going to focus on? What is my beat, as we say? And I decided that
Yeah.
money was going to be my beat to start, see where it goes. I needed a foot in the door. And it stuck because I quickly realized just how much of an appetite and need there was for financial literacy. I, too, was somebody who was in it, not only giving the advice, but also needing the advice as a 20
Mm,
something living in New York, working in media, making not a lot with extravagant bills. And so that's where the story started. And now, fast forward to today, there was a layoff in between, which was another pivot point for me. Getting laid off was really a tough time, but also a gift in some ways to say, okay, well, this decision has been made for me. I can't go back to my
mm,
job. What am I going to
right.
do? And I realized at that point, I had a body of work that I was enough to start something of my own. And that was what now, 14, 15 years ago, where
Wow.
to me that meant I'm going to call some shots. I'm going to create the content. I'm going to distribute the content. I'm going to go direct to consumer. I'm going to go directly to my readers. I don't need a media company. And I always thought I did. I thought, like, who are you? Who are you if you're not working for a big name company? I've worked for all of them. And so it was a very much it was a time for really self-reflection and feeling and really digging deep to find the courage and the self-confidence to say, I'm enough. I can do this. I have a book.
Yep.
I have ambition. I know what I'm doing. And from there, I layered on to all of the things. I wrote more books. I have a podcast now. I talk all year. I talk on stages, online, and work in television. So it's a lot. And I think because that too speaks to my personality of I'm like an appetizer girl. I like to flavor it all. I like to taste it all. I don't want to commit to one entree.
Yep.
I want to have all different experiences, and that I feel is very much the way that I have commanded my business too. So it's a long story. I'm sorry I took so long to answer that, but I hope it was
Not at
interesting.
all. It was. And so this book, A Healthy State of Panic, what inspired you to write this book and who is this book for?
I wanted to write a book. This is my fourth book. I wanted to write from a different place this time. I didn't want to write again about how to in the money world. Although this is a
Hmm.
bit of a money book, it's not entirely. I wanted to write something creative, extremely creative. I really wanted to challenge my own writing and to challenge even my own thoughts. And this book was born not just during the pandemic, but it was brought to life after I say 40 years of living life afraid, but somehow getting things done. That
Mm,
I have been this person who, if I was to sit down and write a collection of essays about my life and find the through line, which is what I first attempted to do in writing this book, that maybe there is an interesting aha or a big idea. And the big idea that kept coming up and up and up was that I have a very unique relationship with fear, much like my relationship with money. But my relationship with fear is such that I don't think it's bad. I don't think that when I experience fear, I'm being weak. If anything, I think, oh, what an opportunity I have right now because my body, my soul, my everything is telling me something of importance. And now it's my job to go figure out what it is. When fear shows up, it is an opportunity. Just like a lot of other emotions we experience, they tell a story. They give us there's context there. There's a signal, perhaps. And when I presented this to my editor, she said, "That's weird. Why don't we run with that? Because our culture is very anti-fear. We think fear is
right.
weakness. We think fear is something to combat. That when it
Hmm.
arrives, we either have to fight it, we have to ignore it. That
Right.
certainly impulsively, instinctively, when fear shows up, we tend to overreact or we underreact or we
Right.
get stuck. And so that's where the confusion lies. It's like, how can I actually, how is fear even positive if I'm always in these sort of like stuck places with fear? And I think it's because we haven't been, first of all, told that it's okay to be afraid. And second, we haven't been
Hmm.
told here's how to deal and navigate with your fears in a constructive way
Yeah.
so that you can get closer to what you want to do in a more self aligned way, using fear as a tool to do the thing in a more protective way, whatever you want to protect. So that was the genesis of the book. And again, I was my fourth book. I'm in my 40s now. My life's changed. I'm a mom. It's been almost 10 years even since my last book. And so I'm kind of done with like financial books with like the 10 ways to do this and the 3 ways
Hmm.
to do that. And I wanted to write something again more personal was still a nod to my financial acumen and advice, but much more. I'm looking
Right.
now in my career to create a bridge for myself so that I can talk beyond the things that I've been talking about, which I've always really been doing. I mean, when we're talking about money, we're talking about life, but this was really a deliberate move in that direction. And look, I mean, I'm here with you, with Terry Cole.
Yeah.
I don't know how often you talk about money on your show, but I like to think that I'm here because first and foremost, we're going to have a discussion that's more encompassing, right? Than
Right.
just like money. We're going to talk about feelings and we're going to talk about humanity and we're going to talk about work. And I have a lot of thoughts on all those things. So I wanted to create a
Right.
vehicle for myself that would allow me to show up in those places.
I love this. There's such a focus on fear, and the stuff that you're talking about, because I do think that it's a wasted opportunity so much of the time. And because it is part of the human condition, right? Nobody has the power to be like, I'm going to be fearless. And in wanting to be, it's what you're teaching us and what you're talking about is learning from this feeling of fear. Why am I afraid? Getting into it. You actually say in the book that fear teaches us who we are. So
Hmm.
say more about that if you would.
I know, and that can sound so for someone who is not used to thinking that fear can be a positive or a strength. It's like, oh my God, that's so insulting. How insulting that you think fear tells me who I am because I'm not weak. I'm not a coward. And I'm like, I know that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that when you feel fear, well, fear is personal. And just like what makes me sad, what I grieve, what I stress out about, of course, there are universalities to this, but also very personal. And so, what a missed opportunity. I love what you said about like this missed opportunity to not look at fear and examine it, look under the hood. Like, what is it? How did it arrive? What is
Hmm.
it trying to tell you about yourself? And not just yourself. I mean, that's sort of like, okay, where do we even begin? But specifically, your goals, what you want to protect, what you value.
Hmm.
Not always is fear the healthy instrument in our lives, but I think that what I write about in the book, what I wanted to focus on specifically in the book, were these crossroads that are high stakes in our lives that pertain
Hmm.
to our finances, our careers, our relationships, our emotional well being. When we feel fear in those moments, well, I think fear has a message. I think fear is not just there to give us an irrational sense of what's going on or to make us want to hide or feel stuck.
Hmm.
It's there because it's got some friendly advice and we are the adults in the room. When we feel emotions, and this we forget this, like I'm still in control. I have agency over this emotion. And so
Hmm.
often we give these emotions way too much power. Like if fear
Right.
is a friend, there has to be a balance of power, right? There has to be a
Yep.
a give and a take and an exchange. And sometimes when we keep talking about fear as this like negative, we tend to be afraid. We are afraid of fear, and we
Yeah.
just like don't
Yep.
want to deal. We don't even want to unpack it. And we make a lot of assumptions about what fear is when actually, I mean, look, you and I would not be here podcasting if it wasn't for fear. Fear has been a survival mechanism forever. And I think as we have evolved as creatures, so has our relationship with fear. So it
Hmm.
not only shows up when our lives are at stake, but our
Right.
livelihoods as well. So let's give it a minute. Let's give it fear a chance. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. I love it. Give peace a chance, give fear a chance. And look at it with sort of new eyes. How do you create this space though between the reactive fear that a lot of people feel, right? Especially, I
Right.
mean, money, not to be a therapist, but money is never just about dollars and cents. It is so loaded psychologically for people. There is so much family of origin stuff. There is so much what you experienced growing up stuff. You were sharing that your family was kind of open, that it wasn't like a taboo, weird thing, that it was okay. I think in more traditionally American culture, at least my own, there's way more uptightness around everything, including money.
Yeah.
So
Right.
sexuality and, like not talk. And my family was kind of waspy in respect to like anything. You just didn't talk about anything that was unpleasant or would be looked at as unseemly in a way, or like gauche almost, to talk about money that was considered like yuck.
Yeah.
Who does that? But what that does is, even though my parents were very fiscally responsible, we saw them once a month writing the bills, like they would do what they needed to do. It still left this shrouded mystery around money. And I feel like in my own life, I've mastered the art of making it. And only in the last 10 years have I had any clue as to how to maybe hold on to it and save some of it. Like my whole thing was very Marie Forleo. Like there's always more where that came from. Just make some more,
Yeah.
but
Right.
nobody want, then I decided like, I don't want to work like a beast forever.
It's so funny. Like I hear this a lot from people about, growing up, and it's very generational where, we assign these manners around money. Like we're not allowed. If And I think that is rooted in fear. We are masking our fears by saying, "Oh, but it's not appropriate." Instead of
Hmm.
saying I'm fearful, saying, "Well, I don't do that because it's not appropriate. I'm being a better
Right.
person, in fact, because I'm not talking about money." It's so interesting. It's like, I know there's actually a whole field of financial psychology now and financial therapy now, which, audience, if you're interested, that is an opportunity for you. Highly recommend that for everybody at some point in their lives. But you ask about space and how to essentially like put this into practice. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, our intelligent brain is saying that I have agency over my emotions. Fear can be helpful. It's a tool. But how though? Like when I'm in a moment of feeling extreme fear/anxiety, and this is a high stakes moment, and there's only so much time to make a decision, like I think though what I would recommend is that you take a minute, an actual 60 seconds, when I
Hmm.
am terrified, which is all the time, because I'm a mom of two, I run a business, I'm a breadwinner in my marriage, I get up on stages all the time. I
Hmm.
present as fearless. I've done a really good job of presenting. People are like, I
Hmm.
don't understand how you're fearful. And it's because I've learned a few tricks. When the fear shows up, when it crops up, I don't make any decisions. I
Hmm.
first just breathe. I might read the room. I might go, I need to
Hmm.
get more educated. I need to go fill this gap with something
Hmm.
constructive, which is not always making a decision towards that thing, but again, it could be a knowledge gap. It could be, I need to make a phone call. It could be, I need to get some sleep. It could be,
Right.
I need to just breathe more. So these are the sort of like internal things that we can do. And essentially, what you're doing is you're creating distance between you
Hmm.
and the hyperness of that emotion. And so, like, I remember one time, this is like very unique to my life because I was a broadcast journalist for a long time, and I was a fill-in anchor one time for at CBS in New York. It was the overnight desk, and I'm about to go on. I have about 45 minutes to live, and my contacts shriveled up and died. Like basically, like
Right.
you ever have that moment? January contact wearers like contacts take on a life of their own sometimes. Like my one contact just like popped out, the other one just dried up. I was like basically blind now, and I'm supposed to
My
read the
God.
prompter, and
Oh,
I'm in my
no.
I'm like, okay, I'm freaking out, and I'm thinking, okay, I have a few options here. I can like start panicking and do nothing.
Right.
I cannot go on the air
Right.
because I just can't read. I'm gonna be that anchor who's like reading off the papers in front of her face, which is not really TV friendly. And then what I did was instead I was like, okay, let's calculate actually the reality of what it would take for me to hail a cab, go back to my apartment, grab my eyeglasses, and come back to the studio, which I
Mhm.
estimated because I've been doing that commute every day for like several weeks. I was like, that's going to take like 18 minutes, you know, and I don't have to be on the air for another 45 minutes. So if I
Mhm.
go now and do this, and I'll tell my boss, this is what I'm doing. So he has a plan too, just in
Yep.
case I get stuck in traffic or whatever.
Right.
But I think I could make this, And like, so first, my instinct to be afraid was like feeling stuck. But when I
Right.
recognized that, I discovered the fear in me. I was like, this is fear. And fear has like, for me, like, there's like just, it's very personal. Like, for me, it like lives, it manifests in my chest.
Mm.
Sometimes it's right in my belly, but it's like, it's there. And I'm like, okay, you came for a visit. This is like, I have to make a decision here. What's going to be my move? And my move in that moment was to go, okay, what's possible? What is
Mhm.
possible that is realistic too? Like there's possibilities and then there's realistic possibilities. And so I did it. I got the glasses, I got on the air. And that's a very like kind of day to day example, which is, maybe it's not as high stakes as like, I'm going to quit my job or I'm about to get married or should I buy the house? But I think that it's just a micro example of how when fear shows up in these little moments during our lives, the instinct, and even for me, it is always to want to like freak out. But I
Mm.
have to, knowing because I have the knowledge now, right? This is what the book is. It's like telling you, this is what fear
Right.
can do if we give it a
Right.
chance. If we do this work. That's what I've been essentially practicing for a lot of my adult life, although as I talk about in the book, it took me a while to understand this. It wasn't like instinctive. I didn't know this from childhood. I was actually the poster child for fear growing up. I
Mm.
had many, 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 many fears. And my parents raised me by design to be afraid of a lot of things because as immigrants, my mother was young, she didn't speak the language, she didn't have agency insofar as like she didn't have money or a license, and that she had me. She was terrified. And I think, okay, I get it. And so she made
Yeah.
me afraid of strangers, of stepping out of line, of going against authority, of all sorts of things because she wanted to keep me quote unquote safe. But
Right.
as I write, it definitely backfired. I mean, and it persisted in my 20s. I was so afraid that I almost got fired multiple times.
Mhm.
I was striking out on the dating field. I had a real problem with fear because I was trying to be
Right.
fearless and that wasn't working
Mm.
for me.
So you shifted your lens to having a different relationship to fear, and things shifted for you.
They did. I realized that pretty soon people were like commenting on me like, "Oh, here's Farnoosh again, being afraid, being timid." And I'm like, "Yeah, and like,
Mm.
things are working out because I'm
Right.
okay with it." Like I just got okay with it. I kind of started to stop fighting. I stopped fighting fear. I started instead to just
Mm.
understand that okay, this is who I am. I have fears and I am still doing stuff. It wasn't when I started to realize that I'm running a business, I'm a mom, I'm falling for love, and all these things that are scary, and I'm somehow doing them, and I'm also the scary person. Like, so what's going on? And I realize it's because I'm never that person who's like bragging about being fearless. If anything, I'm the person who's like gets quiet when she gets afraid and
Right.
starts to make a plan.
Right. So what do you see because you're working with tons of people with this. How do financial anxieties typically manifest in the people that you
Oh,
see, in the people that you help?
well, there's so many questions that we ask of ourselves that I think are about our financial fears. Like, when will I ever retire? Will I have enough? Am I enough? How will I ever be able to ask for a raise? When we're afraid of money, we're afraid of facing the money. So it leads to a lot of
Mm,
avoidance. So if you find
yep.
yourself not wanting to open up your bills, not wanting to have a conversation about money with your partner or your boss or anybody, there is probably a rumbling of fear there. If you are unsure about your own capabilities in your
Mm,
financial life, you don't think that you're ever going to get out of debt, you're ever going to be able to master investing, you're ever going to be able to buy a house.
right.
To some extent, there are real forces at play. I mean, right now, if you're trying to buy a house, it's pretty difficult, relatively
Right.
impossible. And so that's not necessarily a personal symptom, but it's that if you think I will never be able to do this because it's going to be forever out of reach for me, I think there might be a hint of fear there that you're afraid of like actually realizing your potential and knowing what the work is involved to like getting to the point to have the credit and have the income and have the down payment for a home. And that's all, it's like a lot. So I get it. It's not, and I say this repeatedly in the book that fears are valid. Like when you're afraid,
Mm-hmm.
of course, the world's a scary place. And when it comes to money,
Yep.
I mean, of course, we're all terrified because it's a limited resource. And as
Mm,
women, and if you are a Black woman or, an immigrant, well, you're also up against bigger odds financially. You are
right.
behind the financial eight ball. You're getting paid substantially less than your male counterparts. The opportunities that people give you are fewer. And so for all these reasons, yeah, our
Yeah.
fears
It's
are
real.
founded. And so
Yeah.
they manifest in a lot of avoidance. They manifest in a lot of us shortcutting ourselves,
Mm,
underestimating ourselves, not feeling as
yep.
though we can do the thing.
Right. So for anybody listening who's like, I'm so anxious, what would you say is the first step to sort of working with your fear about your, I guess it's your money anxiety, really, is what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
So throughout the book, I offer different sorts of questions that we can ask ourselves when fear shows up, not just in our financial lives, but there are 8 other chapters that deal with fear when it's like the fear of loneliness, the fear of
Mm,
rejection, the fear of missing out, FOMO, and
mhm,
failure and uncertainty. Fear shows up in these different ways, in these different emotional states. And with money, the very first question, if you're fearing money, if you have a fearful sort of narrative that you have about money, I want you to question the narrative. Specifically, I
mm,
want you to understand, where did this fear come from?
mm,
Because money, unlike a lot of the other fears that I tackle in the book, it's not a state of mind. It is a thing. It is a tool. It's very abstract too these days. It's not like we even
mhm.
use paper money anymore.
Right.
It's virtual, it's digital. And so often I say when we fear money, what we're really fearing is our relationship with money, our understanding of money, our interpretations of money.
Yeah.
And so I want us to dig that out, and I want us to understand how we developed that particular fearful relationship with money. And often I find we go back to childhood again and we see, oh my gosh, this is a fear that I inherited from my culture, from my parents, from my friendships, from the media. And it's not like
Mhm.
I experienced something that gave me evidence that this is a valid fear. It's that maybe others experienced it or I heard about it and it just became part of my own narrative. And I think that
Right.
when we can do that unpacking, it's kind of groundbreaking. Like you realize, first of all, that it's not yours, that you have the permission to distance yourself from this,
Mm,
and you haven't been giving yourself this permission for whatever reason, but now you're going to, because it's enough is enough.
right.
And I would also say that, there's a very visceral fear of money around not having enough. This comes up a
Yep.
lot. People, I'll never have enough. I'll never have enough. And the irony of that is that often when I find people say that, it's like, it's never about the money. Like they have money,
Mhm.
they have a job, they have
Yep.
savings. It's something much deeper.
Yeah.
And maybe it is because their parents went through a bankruptcy. Maybe it is because they're a child of like the recession, and they
Yep.
saw their parents lose their homes or they'd lost their jobs in a recession. And I'm like, isn't it interesting? You feel this way, and yet you have abundance, but you don't see that. You don't feel rich. So I say, first
Right.
of all, there are two things I want you to acknowledge with this fear. One is that maybe we should thank it. Maybe we should
Mm.
thank this fear that you've had of never having enough, because you've actually gotten pretty far in life.
Right.
So maybe this fear drove you to excellence. But also
Yep.
realize that, this isn't your exclusive fear, and it's not your fear to fight. And you can get rid of it, and you can say goodbye to it, and you can rewrite this narrative. There is no evidence, right, in your life that this is what's going to play out. We
Right.
sometimes don't give ourselves enough credit. We are our best predictors of what's going to happen in the future. You just look at your past.
Yep.
And I do this to myself. It's a check in you got to do with yourself. I do this with my kids too when they're afraid of their own potential
Hmm.
because they're going in for a test or something or a social scene and they're like anxious. I go, you do this all the time. Last weekend or last Monday, this happened.
Yep.
What happened? Did you fail? Did you get booed out of the party? Did nothing? No.
Right.
You still have friends. You get good
Right.
grades. Life's moving on, and so sometimes just knowing your own patterns is refreshing and gives you the the license to go, okay, this has no space anymore in my
Yes.
mind.
I I love that. It's like seeking evidence of your strengths instead of, as Patricia Moreno would say, fighting for your limitations. Instead of fighting for your limitations, like, no, it's really going to be terrible. It's actually what you're saying is find the evidence. We
Yeah,
have hard core, like real life data of things we have done. We can do
right.
hard things, as
We
Glennon
forget
Doyle
who
would
we
say.
are.
We do.
And in the financial world, there's a metaphor. I mean, in finance, we say, past performance is not necessarily an indicator of future performance, but by
Hmm.
golly, we're going to look at the data. Like, if you want to know whether to invest in XYZ mutual fund, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to look at its history. How
Yep.
has it performed? And of course, life happens and it can not go in that direction again, but most times it does.
Yep.
We're pretty
And it
predictable
never
beasts.
hurts. Yes, it never hurts
Yeah.
to look at data though, right? Right. Data is data, right? We don't say that it is, it's always perfect, but it's something. And certainly with human behavior, that shit is predictive. There really is no doubt that it is. I have a question for you that I ask everyone about boundaries, because that's my obsession. So personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle and how did you overcome it if you have?
Hmm. It wasn't too much of a struggle, but it's something that is so important. And I didn't do this immediately, and I started to, and my God, changed my life. Is and it's a financial boundary. It's that I don't work for free. I run a business. I don't run a charity, and even if I ran a charity, I would still have to pay myself a salary. And
Yep.
so I have lately been reminding myself and others of this. I don't know what's going on, but for some reason we think it's okay to not pay for a
Hmm.
speaking engagement where there are going to be
Hmm.
sponsors and ticketed attendees. And we think it's okay for you to just show up and be present and support a company in an initiative and they're making money and you're not. I just feel like maybe there was a time when I would have done that for
Yeah.
the experience and
Sure.
the learning, but
Yep.
no, that is not a forever business plan. And
Mm-mm.
they say no money, I say no worky. That's it. Like I'm making T-shirts,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it's a boundary, and it's hard to exercise it sometimes because oh my gosh, there is such a penalty in some ways for women who want the payday or the bigger payday, right? We are
Mm-hmm.
seen as greedy. We're
Mm-hmm.
seen as having our values misaligned. We're not
Mm-hmm.
nice. We're not being team players. Whereas there's
Mm-hmm.
never an expectation that a man's ever going to do anything for free.
Right.
And
It's so
we
true.
somehow have to like excuse ourselves from that. And
Mm-hmm.
I am over it. I'm over it. And I have a wonderful, wonderful talent agent. He's essentially like my business manager at this point. We were working together for 15 years. And luckily, he also sees this as a hard and fast truth.
Mm-hmm.
But even and I will say this, and he's a man and I'm a woman, but and even for him, it's difficult sometimes to say no to
Yep.
where he sees maybe there's another, like, but there's this opportunity. You could be there. There could be someone interesting in the room. And I'm
Yep.
like, no. Again, maybe when I was like 23, but
Yep.
now I have no time for this. I need to prioritize the paying gigs first. And that's not to say that I won't do anything in kind or for free, but when I know that I'm going to be the only one not making money in the room, that doesn't feel
No.
good.
It doesn't make sense though, and I think that,
It
that's
makes
a
sense.
beautiful boundary to make, because I know in the beginning of all of our careers coming up, there's a lot of bartering and there's a lot of wanting to support people, and it gets to a point where why would that be the expectation? You're an expert. I'm an expert. We should be paid for our time. That's it.
Right.
Like that's the end of the story. So I love that so much. You guys listening and watching, the book is A Healthy State of Panic: Follow Your Fears to Build Wealth, Crush Your Career, and Win at Life. Farnoosh, thank you so much. Where can people
Thank
find you? How
you.
can they learn more about you? How can they follow you?
Thank you so much, Terry. I would love for you to visit ahealthystateofpanic.com, and there you can learn more about where the book is available. And I've got some events coming up if you'd like to join me in person in real life. I also host a podcast 3 days a week. It's called So Money, and it's going on 9 years. And I love
Wow.
it. And you can subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And on Instagram, I'm loving the Instagram. I'm not like into TikTok or Threads or Twitter anymore. I'm
Same.
just Instagram for me is my watering hole, and I love to just DM with people. If you have questions for me, you want to share a thought, I'm usually there. And if I'm not there, I'm with my family. So those two places, Instagram and family.
Love it. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you. I'm learning so much from you.
Thanks, Terry.